the hour. Going to be kicking off here in just a minute or so. Let some more folks join in. Got just we can do some brief introductions. We had a nice morning trying to pivot a little bit. One of our hosts, Craig Doyle. This is not Craig. You're looking at Mark at the bottom of the screen here. Craig Doyle got pulled into a last minute change, and so, gosh, Marc Stcherbina, just a godsend, a good friend, and a commentator for MLR, executive leadership coach, and a great amount of experience around mental health, mental wellness. I don't know how we pulled it off, but I owe him one big time. Marc, thanks for joining us and being our host. You're going to be amazing. Thank you, bud. Really appreciate you joining today.
My pleasure, Kevin. And, you know, I had to make it work. As you said, something like this, any discussion around mental health, I'm in. If I can make it work, I'm in. And this is so important. And I'm extremely flattered that you called me off the bench to come in and on the field. And to see these other beautiful faces, handsome faces, ones that I'm familiar with, Will Hooley, Jake Turnbull, and of course yourself, Kevin. And great to see you too, Robin. Thanks for your facilitation in getting me into this meeting. We had to make it challenging, right? That's what life's about, and we prevail. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today, obviously. Hi, I'm not Craig Doyle. Apologies for those expecting. We've probably had a few people jump off because of that. Hopefully not. Marc Stcherbina is my name. As Kevin mentioned, he and I are friends and colleagues. We've commentated a couple of rugby games together, believe it or not. And I am a former player myself. Grew up in Sydney, played rugby professionally in Sydney and Europe for about 12 years. And I had a career-ending injury. I broke my neck. And that for me was, as you can imagine, a very testing time, a challenging time, a scary time. I had to navigate the transition from professional rugby, not just into the next phase and what's my career going to be and who am I, but will I fully recover from this neck injury? Fortunately, I have. I don't want to spend too much time talking about my story, but I just wanted to mention how near and dear this topic is to my heart. I've had my own struggles. I still do. And through my personal growth journey, through that transition, I've developed a passion for mental health advocacy, emotional intelligence coaching. Kevin mentioned that I'm now a leadership coach. And it first started, I wanted to coach athletes and help athletes because what really hit home for me, and I'm sure these gentlemen will have their own experiences they can share, but a former teammate of mine many years ago, post-retirement, his name is Dan Vickerman, and he was a Wallaby. It was at the top of his game. And obviously I was shocked to hear the news that he had died by suicide. He'd taken his own life only 5 years after a very celebrated career. And it shook not just the rugby world, but the sporting world. And a lot of awareness naturally came from that, and conversations developed as we're about to have here today. So that was important, but not enough. That was many years ago. And then the stigma still exists, especially around sports people. And that's why I'm so pleased to be joined by these gentlemen who play the game of rugby and have played and understand fully the stigma involved, especially for male contact sport athletes around expressing struggles with mental health. We're going to dive into that today. Let me introduce our panelists. We've obviously got Kevin Swiryn. Now, I don't want to miss anything. I know these gentlemen well, but I want to just make sure that I've got the cliff notes that Chris Doyle would have expressed to you. So you've been with USI for nearly 10 years. I didn't know that, Kevin. That's amazing. Time flies. 10 years. In your second year, he was honored with the internal Dale, is it Coles or Cowles? Coles? Yeah. The Dale Coles Up and Coming Broker of the Year Award. That I did know. You told everyone. He earned the prestigious Peak Award 5 times, and in 2019 was the Producer of the Year in his region. In 2020, he was promoted to leadership role to grow and develop the entire USI Washington sales team. We are in the presence of greatness, people. And I know you from rugby, and what a leader you are, and that you displayed. And it was a pleasure to be around you. You've been both a player and a coach, played for the USA national team for 15s and 7s for many, many years. You participated in 2 World Cups. Wow. Before we gloat about you, let's talk about Jake Turnbull. So, Sydney boy, fellow Sydney boy.
Yep.
And you signed for the Houston SaberCats in 2018. Remember that? Called many of your games. Where you played 2 seasons and you served as a youth development coach in their player pathway program, giving back to the game, extremely important. Then you played for DC and Austin before joining Seattle for the 2023 season. What a season you're having so far, buddy. Before joining MLR, Turnbull played with the Glendale Merlins at Infinity Park and led the team to win the 2015 Pacific Rugby Premiership. Remember that well. At the national level, you've played with the US Selects, the secondary national team for the US, and you boast 2 caps. So already a celebrated career and many more highlights to come for this young man. And last but not least, Will Hooley from Cambridge, England. Another funny accent for all the Americans on the call. Started playing rugby at the age of 5 years old. Will, I can tell. Currently play for the San Diego Legion, best in the West at the moment. Sorry, Jake, that can change. And represents the US for the men's 15 side. Those that know Will, very prominent in the national team setup, and you already have 15 caps. So you previously played for the Saints, one of my old teams, near and dear to my heart, Birmingham Moseley, Exeter Chiefs, Bedford Blues, bit of a journeyman, our Will. Saracens, you have a degree in sports media and journalism, and a bright future in journalism, I might add, having written for various publications, including The Guardian, and has his own podcast. So a very well qualified panel of guests we have here, especially to talk about mental health. Mm-hmm. So there's your introductions. Welcome, gentlemen. This is it's so good to be in your presence. And I just want to mention, and feel free to jump in, Will, Kev, Jake, about why we're here and the great initiative that we're all here under the banner of USI Insurance. We've got LooseHeadz. You see the gentleman wearing the LooseHeadz shirts. It's the clothing brand and a mental health charity. And Major League Rugby. Kevin mentioned that I'm a commentator of Major League Rugby. I co-host All Access. And we've been featuring this month on Mental Health Awareness Month, this initiative. Will Hooley has a fantastic video that he spearheads. Do we get to play that here or not really? We're just going to talk about it. We'll send links. Okay, there's links to this video. It's incredible. It's amazing. We need more of it. And we're all here under the banner of these 3 great organizations combining to change the stigma. Kev, what can you say about USI's involvement and why?
Yeah, no, appreciate that, Mark. We, just for everyone on the call, USI and Major League Rugby have been working together since the inception of Major League Rugby from the beginning. We've supported them in terms of player welfare, risk management, insurance, and their overall business needs. And so, obviously with my background, super passionate about the idea that my 2 passions are colliding and working together and supporting each other. And, there was a lot of challenge through COVID and, and keeping the doors open, if you will, and the players playing. And I think it's pretty special to be coming out of that. And after COVID, after 2021, we really started digging in deeper to our partnership, and wanted to find this initiative, that we all could resonate with, and it was around mental health and mental health awareness, and so this is our second webinar, second May mental health awareness sort of initiative to promote tackling this stigma. Rugby is a growing sport in America. We have the World Cup coming up in 2031. And it's pretty exciting time to leverage both USI, growing organization, MLR, growing organization, this conversation around mental health that needs to grow even more. And so we're excited to be a part of it.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it's fantastic. Will, this is your third year as a LooseHeadz ambassador. Congratulations and thanks for everything you do. Discuss in a little bit more detail your role as an ambassador.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, and thanks for the introduction. Always very kind. Yeah, I haven't paid you to say all those nice things. So look, it's great to be here, and I remember being on the first webinar with USI. So hopefully there's some similar or familiar faces who are back for this second go. Look, for me here in the US, I came over here full time to the USA. As you can hear, my accent's a bit funny, isn't it? Not quite that southern Texas twang. But came here in the end of 2021. And my big belief is I really wanted to bring LooseHeadz into the rugby community within Major League Rugby, but also here in America. So I sit as an ambassador for the charity. There's a bunch of ambassadors all over the world now, which is incredible considering ultimately LooseHeadz isn't actually that old in terms of how many years old it is. So I sit in a position where they put me in charge. I'm not sure in charge is the right sort of formula when you want to talk about a mental health organisation, of, I guess, other ambassadors, one of which, of course, is, I believe, sat here on this call, Jake, as an ambassador for his team, a loosehead in the Seattle Seawolves. So that's my sort of role within the Major League Rugby. And then also as a loosehead ambassador itself, it's about spreading awareness. And we have this sort of, I don't know what you want to call it, slogan or way of saying it, is tackling the stigma around mental health. You talked about it before, Mark, how our sport is this macho, physical game that we play, both men and women. But actually, underneath all of that, we all have our own different battles. And I think it's so important within the rugby community, within the USI community, in fact, any organisations, that we are looking out for each other. And LooseHeadz hopefully gives that sort of platform for mental health to be talked about, for awareness to be created. And I hopefully have tried to play my part in helping that here in San Diego, in the US, and of course, as an ambassador for LooseHeadz.
Wonderful, Will. Yeah, you mentioned the stigma, and I'd like at various points for us to talk a little bit more about that, what it means, how we can change it. I want to hand it over to Jake. You mentioned that Jake is another ambassador. There's 31 ambassadors across all 12 clubs in Major League Rugby, which is fantastic. Jake, you can see Kevin Swiryn's shirt says mental fitness with a little MLR logo. So a lot of the stuff you've been doing and talking about, especially with the videos that are coming out, is around mental fitness. So just like Will, tell us a little bit more about your role as an ambassador, and also what does mental fitness mean to you, Jake?
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for the kind words. I wouldn't say I'm young. I'm probably getting a bit older now, but appreciate it. Like I'm, really excited to be part of LooseHeadz now. This is my first year. I was introduced a couple of years ago, obviously through MLR, and my mate Sebastian Decheval, who is LooseHeadz ambassador, is currently the ambassador for the Newcastle Falcons, and just a champion bloke. He wants to move into sports psychology once he retires, and spent a lot of time with him. For me personally, like mental fitness is really, really important. In the early stages of my career, like I can confidently say I was mentally unfit, and I was, lack of confidence. I was inconsistent. And I remember a certain time, I think I was about 24, 25, and I kind of had a hard look at myself and was like, I kind of need to change a few things. And, I was 120 kilos, 6'2". And it's like, well, it's not physical. That's wrong with me. It's the mental side. And I started delving into these podcasts and reading books. And for me personally and professionally, it had such a profound impact. I noticed all these different aspects of my life, turning positive, having a better impact. And that's why it's super important for me. And as an ambassador, and now I'm a bit older, I have a bit more of experience, it's awesome to give back. I was chatting to one of the young blokes, and I won't mention his name, the other week. We're having a few beers, and we're kind of chatting about, performance and whatnot. And you can kind of tell when he plays, he's, mate, deer in headlights. There's a lot going through his head. So to kind of sit down and have a chat to him, like, oh, well, what do you think? And he's like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And I was like, all right, mate, here's a book for you. It's called The Inner Game of Tennis by Timothy Galway, which I loved. And I gave that to him and I said, mate, read that. And then once you finish, come have a chat to me and I'll tell you what I like to go through my game and all that. And to kind of say, yeah, sweet. So I gave him the book. He's reading it now. And just to kind of see the excitement in his face is such a good like feeling for myself to kind of give back in that aspect. And that's why, you know, I love it. So I'm really excited to be part of LooseHeadz.
Jake, a lot of what you're saying is A, wonderful and inspiring, and B, resonates for me as a former senior player, that you said you take that role on in your team, and how good it is that you can inspire young lads that look up to you. And what you just described was a scenario that a lot of, I guess, sports people, in particular rugby players, struggle to do. And that's ask for advice. That's ask for help. That's maybe lean on some of the support, because in our environment specifically, I'm sure there's people on the call that can maybe relate this to the environment that you're in, whether it's work, whether it's you play sport as well. We're looking for belonging. We're looking for acceptance. And if I come to somebody with mental struggles, right, my mental fitness is being tested, then maybe I'll be judged. So I'll just zip up and carry on. And I guess that's what we're here in part to talk about today. So one of my players, when I was struggling, one of my senior players gave me a book, just as you said that. I'm like, this is me. And he gave me the book called The Power of Now. I recommend it to everyone. And it changed my trajectory. It had me look inward. Self-awareness is key. I'm gonna ask the lads a few more questions about this, but this is my experience. And we need to start there, and being able to just talk to him, being able to express just everything in my head, the deer in headlight syndrome, right, Jake? It's just paralysis, analysis, what if, the worry. This was at the end of my career. And being able to just kind of organize those thoughts and be in the present moment was huge for me. And I got hooked on self-development, and I still am. And being able to give back the way that you do, Jake, as with you, Will, and Kev, really helps our mental health. Yeah. Being in service, being of service to other people. It's fulfilling. Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that. Checking in on other people is a big part of, I guess, the stigma that we talk about. And if people struggle to express how they're feeling, if they're a little down or they're challenged, then we can step up and take some of that pressure off for people by asking how you're doing. So Kevin, back to you. Explain the importance of checking in with others, and not just others, but yourself. Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about checking in with yourself, checking in with others, and how you might bring that into your routine?
Yeah, Mark, great. It's a great question, because it's one of the probably hardest things to do, right? Is to get people to open up about this conversation. And so I think, you know, checking in, asking someone, hey, how are you? Right. It's what are you going to get back? 90% of the time, 99% of the time, you're going to get back, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. All's good. Right. Like, no, it's great. Right. Like, it's the easiest answer, and it's the most common answer. And so you can't just ask one question. When you're checking in with someone, you got to really try to get into them. And I think sometimes, depending on how that relationship is, you got to share yourself, right? When they ask you how you're doing, you don't just say, I'm fine, how are you, right? Like, you've got to get in and be open and honest and sharing, because that opens the door for somebody else to share right back. And so when you're checking in, you're not only looking to see how are they and what are they dealing with, and, you know, and if they are great, that is great. Like, get into that too, by the way, right? You want to experience, you know, that positivity and get them to understand why does it feel so good, and to hold on to those moments. But when it isn't good, that's the harder part to share and the harder thing to talk about. And so not being awkward about it, obviously, and not being in a place where that what they're sharing is bringing any discomfort to anybody. And so just that openness of conversation, and the depth of those conversations are the key sort of components for me and my family and my work life. And then for me personally, my check-in is daily. I know that I have to check in daily on this, because if I don't, it spirals, right? It can go away quickly for me. And so every morning I check in with myself in terms of, okay, how am I feeling? Am I tired? What am I feeling like? And then am I overstimulated because I had a huge couple of days of too many meetings and not enough breaks or whatever? And I can check in the morning and say, I'm driving in my car today and it's silence. It's no audiobooks, no radio, nothing. And not checking my phone, obviously, but just straight in 45-minute commute, and it's silence. And that's my check-in when I need to sort of decompress a little bit. Try to do the same thing at night, give myself a few moments at least to check in on the day. So
great advice for all of us. Will Hooley, same kind of question extended to you. Do you have some experiences that you can share in your workplace, which effectively is rugby, the rugby training environment, where perhaps similar to what Jake was expressing, you've checked in with others and you've seen the benefits of that, or someone's checked in with you? Do you have any anecdotes for us to be inspired by?
Yeah, for sure, Mark. I think the thing is what I said about rugby, the con of rugby is that unfortunately we have this macho environment that we always have had to deal with. I've said that before. But the pro, I would say, about our rugby environment is I do believe our culture is very good. And it's just really interesting how, Kevin, you were talking about, about the checking in and, understanding about meetings and everything like that. And I'm sure it's exactly the same in the corporate world. But if you can have a culture where things are accepted, it's not about overburdening someone with, I'm going to go and speak to Jake about every problem under the sun that I've got. Because what we need to understand is, if you can have this culture where it's just easy to talk about the little small things, or whatever it might be, that just open up the awareness to be, okay, actually, you know what, my problems don't have to be in my head, but I don't have to just keep them all collective. So sorry to just open up with that, Mark, but obviously the kind of things in rugby is problems such as fitness, and I mean that in terms of injury, in terms of performance and selection. All these things we're dealing with at the highest level, which obviously impact our mental health. I can tell you, recently, last year, I had a shoulder reconstruction. Not a very good timing. It was during World Cup qualifiers for the USA, ones that we've lost and unfortunately are now not going to the World Cup this year. For any rugby fans who are listening, I'm sorry about that. But it was literally, it was one of, I guess, misfortune for me, and a real sense of self-pity that I had to deal with this shoulder injury, then also have this goal of mine taken away from me. So it was really hard, but the understanding, and I went away, and I've got to be honest, I seeked professional advice. And one of the things that LooseHeadz does try and talk about is a lot of people will come up to me and say, well, what can you offer me in terms of what can you offer an organization that helps genuine mental health? First and foremost, I'm a first aider in mental health, and that's through MHFA in England. And one of the biggest things is to actually direct people towards that professional help. If you need it, therefore, it could be anything from, God forbid, but suicidal thoughts all the way to depression. I like to think through some training, you go towards the people who are the most professional for what you need. So for me, just taking my example of with the injury and the kind of lack of just motivation for rugby after not qualifying for the World Cup, I sought professional advice. And it was the biggest and best thing that I ever did. Not that I didn't talk to my family members and other things like that. There are some things that you just need that bit of extra help. And so I'm not sure I've completely answered your question, Mark, but there's a lot of things within all the areas in terms of as a professional athlete, and then of course probably working at USI. No problem is too small. No issue is too small. If you can build a culture where it doesn't feel like you then feel like you might be an overburden for someone, and it's just normal to talk and have that awareness to, as I say again, tackle the stigma. That's something pretty special. I believe LooseHeadz is definitely creating that in the rugby community, and that's why we wanted to spread the word on this webinar.
No, that was great, Will. Anything that comes out of your mouth is fine, whether you answer my question or not. But really appreciate that. And what I do take away is just your vulnerability. No doubt being a LooseHeadz ambassador requires us to lead by example and be able to show that we can be vulnerable. We can express challenges, which you've just done. So I'm going to give Jake an opportunity now to be vulnerable and maybe share some of the challenges, especially as a young player. You said you're a senior player now, right? You've got the benefit of plenty of years under your belt. What's worked, what hasn't worked, the mental fitness you've developed, the mental resilience you've developed. What about when you were younger? What were some of the challenges of being a professional rugby player that really tested you, and how you dealt with that or didn't deal with it?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, start of my career, you know, and I probably still am. I'm still an emotional based player. You know, I wear my heart on my sleeve, and that can have a positive impact, and it can have a negative impact. You know, I'm a type player, when I'm angry, my back's against the wall, kind of the walls creeping in, is probably going to play my best games. But you can't play on emotion all the time, and having to stay engaged is probably a tough part. And that's the start of my career. I was inconsistent because I didn't know how to deal with those pressures. And you know, when you get dropped, stuff like that, you know, you'd kick stones and mope and all that. So that's why at that 24, 25, I made that decision. I remember I talked to myself, had a chat to myself, and was like, you know, I'm going to change this and get mentally fit, because it has such an impact on my performance. And yeah, I think I guess a good example would be when I was, so COVID year, we just got sent back. I went back to Australia because that's where I was based, and I went back to my home club, Eastern Suburbs, and I messaged the coach, being like, oh, I'm keen to play. And he was like, look, we've got no room for you. We've got 2 Brumbies LooseHeadz. You're not going to play. And I was like, what? Yeah. And you know, I've been a East junior since 7 years old. It was my club. You know, I loved it, lived and died for it. And then I had to make the choice to go to Randwick, which was the cardinal sin. It's the arch rival. And I did it, and mate, I got harassed. One of my very good mates didn't talk to me for 3 months from it. Not a lie. My stepdad used to just abuse me because he was an East old boy, and he loved it. But you know, I was like, that was it. And I ended up having a pretty good season. I played first grade all year, made team of the year. And then the last game of the season, it was against East. And it was the battle for second. Whoever got that got second place into the finals. And mate, 3,000, 4,000 people there, majority are all calling me a turncoat. Yeah. And but you know what? I was older now, and I'd experienced it, and I'd dealt with all the pressures from when I was young of being dropped, and had that experience and had the confidence in myself from the self-development of mental fitness. Anyways, we go out there, it's 14-0 up. I'm like, hey, Ronnie, we're doing all right. Next thing you know, we lose 81-21 or 81-28. Yeah, not the best. And then, you know, after the game, I'm just getting abused. Turncoat, 3,000 people call me a turncoat. And I went to the shed, and man, I got probably a tear coming down my eye. I'm like, that wasn't fun. And I had an option. I was like, I can either have a shower, pack my bags, jump in the car and go home and just avoid everyone. But I was like, nah, like you can't live like that. Like, you just can't live like that. And I promised myself, I was like, all right, when I had a shower, got dressed, walked out. I went to the clubhouse, and mate, I was getting abused. And I just copped it for about 15, 20 minutes. But that's rugby. And that's what I love about rugby, is the tribalism that people have. You know, and I did the cardinal sin from jumping clubs. So I was like, look, I deserve it. And we lost. But then after 20 minutes, people just sat down and said, mate, proud of you. Like, you could have gone home and avoided all of it, but you took it on the chin, and we respect you. and there's all's forgiven. And that was that. And then we had a couple of beers and moved on. And that's why, you know, old me for 24, 25 would have crumbled and it just wouldn't have looked good. And that's why, you know, after that, life moved on. And that was, yeah, pretty important lesson in my life you've just got to face your problems. And to go back to the mental fitness of how good rugby is, rugby just puts you in that high pressure environment, in which I love, and it just kind of sets you up for post life. And that's why I just, you know, I love rugby and give everything back to it. So doing this thing once again is super important to me. So I hope I kind of answered your question there.
Great. I mean, great. And you gave me something else there I don't often think about or hear about, and that is the pressure of expectation from others, the tribalism, the loyalty, when you're accused of not being loyal, because that's what we do. We play in front of fans. They feel a sense of entitlement. They feel some ownership over you. Having to deal with that, there's the normal things like fitting into your team, the injuries, the week in, week out selection process. Will I get dropped? Will I get paid? Will I not get paid? But that was a really interesting and you're right, a great take on what you had to deal with as well, and the character you developed, and you faced it. You faced that scrutiny and you've come out the other side stronger for it. You also mentioned rugby, because there's probably a lot of people on this call that are enjoying the stories, but not really relating to, well, you know, I've never played rugby. Some people haven't played sport. But you mentioned high pressure environment of rugby. There's high stakes, it's high pressure, it's high stress, just like the corporate world can be. So I want to talk to Kevin now, who has stepped into the corporate world after being a rugby player at the highest level. And what parallels can you draw, Kevin, first of all, between the two environments, and secondly, how you, as a former rugby player, are able to apply that to the corporate world?
Yeah, Mark, I think, you know, I think about this often, more often than I think I even realize. But, you know, when I was ending my career and going into the corporate lifestyle, right, you know, you're losing that connection, that camaraderie, that teamwork, that every week sort of instant gratification of winning or losing, and feedback on how to improve your game and your craft. And, you know, it's a constant evolution of getting better, high performance, right? That for me was a driver for years and years playing rugby. And so when you step in the corporate world and you're looking at, you know, not having across the board a high performance team that's looking for one single goal, right? Everyone's, as much as you are in this organization, this ecosystem, people are there just to sign in and sign out. Some people are there to be the best, and some people are there, and you have such varying levels and degrees of both personal expectations and brand. And so how do you evolve that culture to be, you know, one target, one goal? That was a huge challenge for me, stepping away from a single goal, a single team, pursuing one thing, and then coming into a bit of a corporate career where it wasn't so much that way. I think stepping in a leadership role, I've been able to impact that differently here and in our office, at least, right, is to sort of bring that mentality together. But the reality is it's about purpose, right? You know, when I look at what was in rugby and what, say, isn't in corporate world, then you're going to always have issues, right? You're going to always have a bit of a conflict there. And so it's been more impactful to align my, you know, what was in rugby and what is in corporate world, and aligning those things to say, it's about your purpose, your purpose and your values. What are you getting out of that truly? Like when I played rugby, the thing that I was most rewarded by was playing well, and not so much that I achieved something or scored tries or did whatever, but what brought me the most value was actually seeing my teammates look at me as someone they could count on. That's what I got most out of it. Like reflecting on it wasn't actually like I scored 2 tries. It wasn't about my ego so much as it was, I knew there were 30 people that looked at me as someone that could change the game or impact the game positively, and they could count on me. And like, that was the biggest reward for me. So you start to evolve that, you start to dissect that in the corporate world and say, I find value in supporting other success, right? And so how do I do that in my daily life, and coaching and leading and supporting my sales team and seeing their success? That's where I'm getting my value. And so you just have to reframe your purpose. It's never going to be the same as it was in rugby. It's just going to be a reframing of that. And so figuring that internally for me was a way to connect. And I find passion every single day when I step into the office. I love what I do. I don't think we're selling insurance and risk management consulting services. We're changing people's lives. We're saving people's lives. We're saving companies from going under and like losing their facilities. We're doing way more than selling an insurance product, right? And you have to reframe it. And so that's how I've connected the parallels to rugby and to corporate world.
Wow. That's like, is that from a book that you've written recently or something? It seems like an excerpt. That was outstanding, Kevin.
Yeah.
You would be. What I took from that and what I heard again is reframing so important, right? So taking that upon ourselves is to take care of ourselves and our mindset. And to me, that's what mental fitness also involves. Not just resilience, right? Not just going through the hard times and coming out better and stronger for it and being mentally fit. It's also things like what self-awareness, how can I reframe things? How can I change my mindset to be able to handle these uncertain times and stressful times? Now, I'll tell you what feels a little bit weird. We've got Robin here with us and we're just talking to all the boys. Robin, are you open to me putting you on the spot and asking you a question? Because I'm sure you have value just like all these gentlemen have to add. Speaking of the corporate world, and I mentioned like self-care is very important in work-life balance when it comes to handling stress and our challenges. What is something that you do for self-care to make sure that you're always filling up your own cup so that you're able to handle being pulled from different angles and from different people, like setting up this meeting today? I was tugging on you pretty hard to get me into this meeting, and you handled it with just grace and composure. Do you have something to share with us and all the people? Like, what is one of your self-care practices?
I really like going on walks. I think moving and being physical, it is a very, you can get stuck sitting for a very long amount of time in meetings and calls. And that does start to drain you and weigh on you a little bit. And I think sometimes for me, just to get up and walk around, to take a call while walking and allow myself to take, if I know I'm going to have an hour call, that I could be moving and multitasking while I'm doing that, I will go for a walk. And I think it just gets your energy levels back, and that helps your creativity, and then it helps you tackle the next problem with a little less drain on the system. You're just a little bit more sprightly and awake, I think. And that helps a lot. I also have a colleague of mine where Rebecca, and she and I will do working sessions together. She works remotely. It's very common now to be working remotely. And both of us miss that daily, the little interaction you take for granted when you're in an office. And so we have blocked times where we schedule times throughout the week to just work in the presence of each other. We'll do a screen share, we'll tackle a problem together. And every week, that's been our checkpoint as teammates to say, okay, what's something I can pull up on my screen, you can pull up on your screen, we can be on video together, talking, interacting as if we were across the table from one another. And that's been really helpful because it has a completely different air to it and feeling than maybe a Zoom call or a meeting. I know people get webinar and Zoom fatigue. I completely understand that as well. This one's a little different in that we are solving a problem and talking it out without a rush or without there being an agenda or a meeting at hand where things can get sort of off track. We're saying we're going to tackle this problem. We're giving ourselves 45 minutes and we're going to be on screen talking it out in a very conversational way. And that gives me a lot of energy too. I think feeding off of your colleagues can be really energizing in a positive way.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm so glad I asked you because, again, so many people on this call have a similar experience working remotely, lacking that connection. Everything's virtual. There's a different kind of fatigue, Zoom fatigue, meetings. So really great advice as well. Simple, but very effective. These rugby players have the benefit of being in an environment together. You have to, right? So there's that camaraderie and connection. I'm going to hand it back to Will and Jake. I want to talk about why we're here and the stigma. So we talk about the stigma of mental health. Some people, we say it a lot, but do we fully understand it? So I'm going to open up to both of you, and you can just sort of bounce between the two of you. What is, again, that stigma and your idea of it and experience of it, and what needs to happen to change it? We'll start with Will.
Well, as I said before, about the natural environment that we have in our sort of business career, is you've got to be tough. You've got to be, you know, take the hit quite literally, physically, and also be able to take feedback very brutally and honestly. You know, it's in terms from coaches or even from players. I'm sure Jake has had experiences like I have over the years, when I remember being younger and some top international players have just, when I've done something wrong, you know about it. But that's the environment we live in. You know, it's a high pressured, elite environment. Now, in that though, doesn't mean that you can't be vulnerable. And that's the stigma which I think was attached, particularly within rugby a few years ago. And that's what we're aiming within our community to. It's okay to not be okay. But one thing I do want to say, Mark, and I would regret not saying this before the end of this webinar, is it's so important that when we talk about mental health, there is a stigma of negativity that is obviously associated with it, in terms of, like you said, you're getting through the tough times, being better for yourself, being better for your team. Let's also make sure that you celebrate good mental health. It's great to be feeling great. You know, and that's something which I really picked up on when I did one of the mental health courses, is that celebrate each other. You know, Robin's talked about earlier, you know, how the fact that when she was working with her colleague, and it really helped, and how good that feeling was. You know, remember those times, because actually we're so going towards the negativity of, oh, that felt rubbish, or you remember the bad times, and sometimes you let the good times sort of sweep under the carpet. So I just wanted to say that, and hopefully Jake will agree with me, just in terms of we're wanting to tackle the stigma in rugby, but we also know how fantastic our culture is, and I hope that USI can also look and understand how good their culture can be. Celebrate that as well, as much as also working on being better, creating the awareness that talking about mental health is okay. And it's okay not to be okay. It's great to be feeling great as well.
Love it. Yeah. What are your thoughts there, Jake?
I agree with everything that Will said. And even before, when Will was saying, you know, you don't want to be that guy that's just relaying all these problems to one person. You still want to have that inner strength to have your internal tools to work out your own problems, which is super important. But you know, when there are those times that there's a problem that you really can't work out yourself, then it's great to have that network, that person that you can relate to. And that's why the rugby culture is so special. Like, I remember when you go to any new environment, right? It's an alpha male dominated arena, right? And everyone's kind of sussing each other out. And that's it. You've got to kind of be a loose head to play rugby, essentially, because you're going in and tackling these 120 kilo blokes going full pelt. But the great thing about rugby is you go out and you can have a few beers, and when the guards get let down, people open up. And that's the beautiful thing about rugby is, you know, you have these such amazing close relationships with people, because you're in these great environments, these cultures, and you see the highs and lows of everyone. And you know, so, like, I've been mates with my close friends for over 15 years since school, but some of the rugby mates are the closest mates I've ever had. And I feel so comfortable opening up with them. And that's due to the fact of this tight-knit culture. And that can be recreated in a corporate environment as well. And, you know, when you're connecting with people, it's hard to kind of tell if someone is sad and feeling down, because sometimes they can mask it really well. But it is important to kind of just portray that, or just to let people know that you're always there. And I think Paddy the Baddy, the UFC fighter, put it brilliantly. He said, you know, I'd rather be a shoulder to cry on than cry at your funeral. And I just thought that's beautifully said. And, you know, you can't always tell, but as long as you show your presence of being a good friend, that's important. I remember, Kevin, I think I watched your webinar last year when you were talking about 2016 when you got injured and you were trying to fight your way back into the Olympics. Mate, you're dealing with an ACL injury and your dream's there. Like, that's so hard. But I remember you said your goal was just to be that upbeat, motivated guy. And it wasn't like you were masking it, but that's just what made you happy. And when you're upbeat and people around you feel upbeat, that's just a great feeling as well. And I do agree with Will of just celebrating the good times. And the bad times do come, and you've got to find a way to tackle that on. You can't just leave it. And that was going back to my story before about facing your problems head on. You can't just go, oh, they'll disappear. Like, if I just close my eyes, they'll go. Like, you've got to face your problems internally. So, yeah.
Great stuff, Jake. And we're approaching our final 10 minutes. I'd love to open it up for Q&A. Before I do, if I could just, because I think of stigma as, which exists in the media, it's in our language as well, right? This stigma of, you've probably heard 1 in 5 people have mental health issues or mental disorders, and that's problematic in itself by saying 1 in every 5. And I know it's just to emphasize how common it can be, but it's kind of divisive when you think about it. Rather than 1 in every 5 of us, because we naturally consider ourselves the 4 in 5, don't we? We don't want to be that 1 in 5 that's mentally ill or has an illness. Rather, 5 in 5 of us experience some mental struggle. It's a continuum, people.
Yeah.
Right? We all have different varying levels of that mental challenge, but we all experience them. So let's start talking about 5 in 5 people and being there and understanding and being curious about what that might be that somebody else is going through. So before we open up to Q&A, Kev, I want to the lads talked about the stigma in professional rugby. You now have the benefit of being in the corporate world. What can be done in corporate that can help tackle this stigma?
Mark, there are a number of things that, it has to be within the ecosystem from top to bottom, right? You have to, it doesn't have to be, I should say, but it really helps, right? When you bleed that through the culture from the executives downwards and upwards, right? There's that top down, bottom up approach. And, it's got to be about curiosity around this conversation and creativity, right? Because you can't say a one size fits all either. And if it sits within HR, then it sits within HR. If it's more of an ambassador type program, right, where the individuals are handling it themselves, and you can build that sort of structure. If it's a leadership to to an employee sort of conversation where, I'm making sure I'm doing that with the folks that I'm helping lead or hiring or developing, then it's that relationship. I think it's an all encompassing, you build it within the entire ecosystem, Mark. It can't just be, hey, I've got this responsibility, this one thing, this one mental health thing is on me, or on HR, or it's everybody, right? And so how you do that, right? Like, I think what we've tried really hard to do is, when there are challenges or issues within the job that you're struggling with, it's okay to talk about it. It's similar to rugby. If you went up to your coach and you're like, I'm really struggling with my tackling right now, I need some help to get better. The fear of bringing that up to the coach is that he's going to now focus more on your tackling, and you might get dropped, right? Because you've highlighted an issue you're having. The same would be true in corporate, is to say, I'm really struggling with managing my time and I'm not feeling effective in the workload that I have. I can't manage it today. I need some help. Then now I'm going to really get into your workload and figure out, well, you're not being very efficient or effective or using the tools or whatever. And that's going to be a problem. And I might lose my job. Same concept. We've really tried to say, this is not about highlighting the issues to be, reprimanding. This is about highlighting issues to help you, right? To get better, to feel better about the work that you're doing. And so we do debriefs all the time. And so this is like the post game after action sort of strategy, right? We are always constantly saying, what could we have done better? What did we do well? Let's focus on those things and let's bring them to the next time. And that's that's the sort of culture I think that helps. That helps in just your daily, right? You're not talking about any sort of issue. You're just making it open and honest.
Kevin, look, great stuff. So many takeaways from what you just said. For me, just the fact that we're having this discussion, I acknowledge the leaders, right, the leadership group at USI for even saying this is important. We need to have this discussion. And as many of these discussions that we can have will help tackle the stigma, yes?
Yeah.
And another thing I heard, I'll put it in another term, Kevin, and then we'll open it up to Q&A, is you said top to bottom, the one-on-ones, the group discussions, is leading with empathy. So we need more empathetic leaders in companies. And that will help. What I mean by that is just having the come from of, I'm here to also take care of my people, not just get results.
Yeah.
So if we create that environment and we lead that way, then people are going to feel safer, aren't they? To come and say, hey, my time management's, I'm a little overwhelmed right now. Can I take a day off, or can I offload this to someone, or can I be assigned something else? People are scared to do that because they're worried about the repercussions. So very well said, Kev, and hopefully there's some nuggets in there for people tuning in today, relating it to their work environment, whether you're a CEO of a company or you're the founder of a startup. This is all good stuff and very important. Q&A. Robin, how are we going to do this? Do you want people can they write questions in the chat if you're a little shy, you don't want to open up your mic and blurt out a question? How do you recommend we do this?
Yes, the great question. At the bottom right-hand side of your screen, you'll see 3 dots to symbolize more. If you click on that, there is an option for QA, and you can type in your question. We will see the questions come in as panelists.
Okay, and try to single out Kevin Swiryn as much as you can. So you can put him on the spot. Develop his mental toughness, his mental fitness.
Marc, just before, because I don't know, the questions will start coming in. I just wanted to maybe mention one thing is just almost a bit of homework for everyone on this webinar, and anyone who might eventually see this as the week goes on, as I know it's recorded, is why don't you challenge yourself? I actually regret using the word challenge. Go in and just check in on someone today. And it could be so small, and it's the start of something. And I remember LooseHeadz, and I didn't explain the story as to why I got involved in LooseHeadz, and I'm not going to go into that now. But one of the biggest things was they had a campaign that was, how are you really? Kevin, you alluded to it earlier about genuinely asking someone, how are you doing? And I'm probably sometimes not always great for it. We're like my parents, who you sometimes take for granted. It might be a mate you haven't seen in ages. It might be that work colleague that you just felt it didn't finish very well, that meeting the other day. Just open it up. Just have that in you to just go over one person today and genuinely ask them how you're doing, because you'd be amazed. Not so much just negative, as I said before, might be positive. Just what kind of answers you might get back and what conversation that could lead to.
Oh, well, great challenge / invitation for people out there. You'll see how good it feels to be support for someone. If I can piggyback on that, Will, one thing that's worked for me is because you might get someone coming back saying, I'm fine, as Kevin alluded to before. So to probe a little deeper, like, how are you really? That can be invasive for some people. Some people will like that and be like, oh, thank goodness he's asking how I really am. You're going to get that. But something I do with all my clients at the very start of our coaching sessions is ask them to rate themselves out of 10. How are you feeling out of 10 today? Because it has us check in with not just how we're feeling, but, well, what does a 10 out of 10 look like to me? And I think that's a good exercise for all of us. What's a 9 out of 10? What's a 10 out of 10? And you can break it down emotionally, mentally, physically. But yeah, a little rating scale, and that, I think, Will, to your point, can really just open up a discussion, even just a discussion where you both get to share. Well, then I can share what a 7 out of 10 looks like and why it's a 7 and not a 9. So wonderful invitation there, Will, for people to check in on others and yourselves. So we have some questions coming in. Matt agrees it's a great idea. I'm going to go to, we've got Greg. Thank you for your question, Greg. Positive to have tough rugby guys talking about this. No question, just a statement. Thank you. We appreciate your acknowledgement there, Greg. From Sonia, thank you. Great advice. These are lovely. This makes us feel good, warm and fuzzy. Thank you. We've loved being here. Will's been affected. Oh no, Matt's saying to Will. Okay. Fantastic idea, Will. You've been affected by this action, checking in on someone who was actually struggling and needed to talk. Made a huge difference in both our lives. Thank you for sharing that, Matt. So agree. And thank you, Tanya, for joining us. Debbie as well. So no questions, I'm guessing. I guess we just answered everything for you with our conversation. That's pretty impressive. Do feel free to ask a burning question. Maybe it's about a situation you're encountering at the moment at work. Maybe you want to share how you're feeling emotionally out of 10 with us right now. So we all get to discuss that. Okay, so we've got, Chris Prentice. Kevin, Swiryn, Chris Prentice. I haven't seen Chris for a long time. The importance of this topic is key for business leaders to understand and embrace. Yes, this is coming from an entrepreneur and a very high level business leader, folks. Chris Prentice, thanks for joining us. He knows much of my story of transition and respect. Thank you. I'd love to hear what is the newest, most impactful change you've made in your life to continue your self-improvement. Okay, question for me. I hope everyone's okay with that. Chris, I'm just the host, but if you really want to know, there's so many impactful things. So since my accident, I actually had this newfound outlook on life that I've been given a second chance, right? Breaking my neck. And since then, I've been committed to what I call living intentionally. So what's been really helpful for me, living intentionally also to achieve balance in my life, not just focus too much on career, not just focus too much on my fitness, but have a balanced approach. So I literally, Chris, I have 10 categories that I set goals for weekly. I actually do it for a 3-month stint, similar to the corporate world. We have Q1, Q2, Q3. Well, I have that for my life as well. So I have 10 categories: career, finances, health, movement, family. And what's important is I've added in there contribution and community. This is why, Kevin, when you said, can you jump on with us today? I'm like, any opportunity to give back, right? I know that gives me fulfillment and it helps me with my balance. And mind and spirit. So I include mind and spirit, and that might look like a gratitude journal in the morning, every morning. 10 things I'm grateful for. Headspace app, meditation. So important. I didn't know much about it at all, but I persevered, and I'm seeing the benefits of just meditating for 10 minutes. So that would be the thing that I've been able over the years to really refine and make a daily, weekly practice, is setting goals on all areas of my life, not just focusing on one or two. So thanks for that question, Chris. All right, Kelly. Okay to not be okay. I believe that was Will Hooley that said that. It's a very strong message for everyone, adults and youth. I urge everybody, click the link below. I don't know if we can put a link on the recording of this, Robin, but I want everyone to watch the video that LooseHeadz USI, and in particular Will Hooley, have put together, and he spearheads talking about how it's okay to be okay, and just getting some thoughts on other rugby players who are LooseHeadz ambassadors. Well, I'd love to make sure that we get everybody out of here on time. Any final words from Robin, Kevin, Will, Jake? I think we've heard enough from you.
I can confirm everyone will get a copy of the recording and an email, and I'll be sure I include the link to the video. It is a beautiful video.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Kevin?
Yeah, well, just Mark, thank you. You're a blessing, man. I really appreciate you jumping in last minute, moving some things around to be able to join us. Couldn't have been more perfect person to host us today. Will and Jake, thank you guys for all that you're doing. You are phenomenal representatives, both on the rugby pitch, off the rugby pitch, for LooseHeadz, that brand, what that means. I love watching you guys, so I'm a fan, and I'm looking forward to you guys facing off in the playoffs, because I'm sure that'll come to it. Great job all around. And of course, Robin, thank you for hosting everybody. Thank you everybody for attending and joining in on the conversation. Take what you can and share the message. We almost doubled our attendees from last year, and we're going to keep going. We're not going to stop with this message. It's not a one day, one time a year type of conversation. It's daily, weekly, monthly. So thank you, everybody. Appreciate you guys. Have a great day. Be well.
Thanks, Kevin. And thank you, Jake and Will, Robin. You've all been wonderful. Can't wait for the next one. Just give me more notice.
Just wanted to say thank you so much. And I'm going to make a conscious effort this afternoon to check in with people who I haven't spoken to in a while. Some people overseas that are old teammates and whatnot. So that's my afternoon. So thank you so much, guys.
Love it, Jake. Thank you so much.
Yes.
Bye, everyone. Thanks again.